Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. We can start. If you have a poster, you can put that out of there. And, well, the first speaker is Alessandro de Cesaris from the Università de Fribourg. Today, he's talking to us of Play Machine.
Yes, thank you, Elisa. Yes? Sì, perfetto, ma in modalità aereo, quindi dovrebbe andare bene. So, thank you all. First of all, many thanks to Sebastian Gold, and to Elisa Gremmo, Lorenzo, and all the others. I'm having so much fun in Trieste, as I was telling yesterday. I used to come here all the time because I had a girlfriend in Trieste. Then she broke up with me. And for 10 years, I haven't been coming, but it's always a big pleasure. So what's been happening is, the reason for the title of my talk is that I'm writing a book on the notion of play and on games. So the end will go in that direction, but this will not be about that. I basically did the most basic and stupid thing you could do with the beautiful title of this conference. I just counted the words. So I said, is a generative artificial intelligence creative? 5 words, 5 questions. And basically, this talk is designed to spark discussion. So it's, of course, huge topics. And Sebastian was a little bit scared by, whoa, this is the entire history of the AI debate. No, I will just propose a few reflections on these topics. And, well, precisely, it's not so to say a well-done theory. The idea is to discuss with you and to tell you how I would like to approach these topics and what maybe is another possible way of approaching these topics. I will tell you something about my background. I come from philosophy, so I have a philosophical background. I started as a German idealism scholar, and, but I work in the field of philosophy of technology and media theory. So I have 3 basic questions that, or 3 frameworks, so to say, that accompany my research. The first one is the tool-medium distinction. So this is a very important question for me. So do we want to consider AI as a tool that we use, or do we want to consider it as a medium, which is as an environment that shapes our perception, our understanding, our way of looking at the world, looking at ourselves, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that this distinction between the tool-medium paradigm is very important when we reflect on technologies in general and on AI in particular. The second framework is philosophy and theology of technology. This is, so to say, something I've been working on for a few years. The basic idea is that the conceptual history related to the way how our tradition works with technology is profoundly influenced by theology. So all concepts, all notions we use when we speak about technology, and I will give a few examples of that, are basically theological concepts. And it's very useful to see how this history, this conceptual history, influences the way how we talk about AI or other technologies. Elisa already said something about the notion of creation. I will say something about other problems. And third, Alexandra said a lot about it in her talk yesterday. I'm really interested in the critique of technical imaginaries, which is, I'm not I'm also interested in how technologies actually work, but I'm really interested in looking at and in criticizing how people think they work. Now, social narratives are built around technologies, regardless of how they actually work. And my general idea is that every interesting technology is at the center of a struggle between imaginaries. So to say, there are opposing imaginaries that shape the way how we talk about these technologies in general. So I choose an image for the cover of my presentation. I hope it will be clear why I've done so. This is a suiseki, so a scholar stone at the entrance of a beautiful nunnery in Hong Kong I visited a couple of months ago. And it's basically a stone. It's a natural object that is put on a pedestal and is, so to say, used for meditation and for contemplation. And there is a very important image scholar, Horst Bredekamp in Germany, who has written beautiful pages on this kind of objects. It's a whole cultural tradition scholar stones. What is interesting about that, about those stones, is that they look like they have been made by someone. So they look like they are artificial objects, but they're not really artificial objects, because the only artificial thing about them is that there is a pedestal, that they've been put on a pedestal and displayed, for instance, at the entrance on a monastery. So the beauty of the scholar stone is precisely that it sparks the question, is it natural or artificial? Is it made or is it just found, so to say? And my general proposal for this talk today, as you will see, is that this confusion, this ambiguity between artificial and natural is a key element if we want to have maybe a fresh, a possible new way of looking at artificial intelligence and technology. So, first of all, I promised 5 questions. I will give you 5 questions and then maybe five answers. I haven't promised the answers, so I promised the questions. So the first one is, what is the difference between generative and creative? I find it so the title of this conference was really interesting because it puts together 3 terms. So generative, artificial, and creative that usually in our history, so in our cultural tradition, are incompatible with each other. So if something is generative, it cannot be creative. If something is artificial, it cannot be generative. So this is what struck me at the first glance. So I wanted to start with this word, generation, so genesis in Greek. And there is this quote by Aristotle that I always like because it looks like a joke, like man is born from man, but not bad from bad, which is basically the difference between natural objects and artificial objects. So we have some sort of generation, which is a natural process, and then we have another kind of production, of coming into being of things that is not generation, but is what Aristotle calls poiesis, which is making, basically. And this difference between generation and creation is crucial in our cultural history for theological reasons. So for those of you who are Christians, the creed of the Council of Nicaea, so the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed in 325 of the Christian era, really states this very important difference between what is generated and what is created. So Christ, the second person of the Trinity, is not made, it is begotten. That's the English translation. In Latin is genitum, non factum. So this difference between generation and creation is a pivotal element in our history, and usually these 2 terms are used as opposites. But what I'm interested in here is to try and understand, why do we use the term generative when we speak of AI? What is generative about AI? And I think that a very specific technological imaginary is embedded in this choice of words. So we call it generative because we come from this tradition, because we have thought, I believe someone yesterday explicitly said generative, no, I believe, yes, Professor Cavazzi yesterday during the concert at a certain point said, it makes, well, it generates. And so that leap was very interesting for me because that's precisely the point. Why, what is the difference? What's the point? What are the traits of generation? For instance, a mother generates a child. That's the basic idea of generation we have. First of all, the product shares the matter of the producer. So I have the same matter. We are made of the same substance. Second of all, there is some sort of uniformity. So the product shares the form of the producer. So a man comes out of a man. A human comes out of a human, will we say today. And then autonomy. The producer has in itself the principle of production. I don't have to choose as a mother how I will make my baby. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to create a way of doing what I want to do. And my child, in turn, will become someone able to generate someone else. So this generative element has these 3 traits: consubstantiality, uniformity, and autonomy, which is the basic idea of everything living. So living things, living natural things generate. So the first answer I would like to propose is, what is the difference between generative and creative? I'd say generation is a process. It's not really something you do. It's something that happens to you. It's something that you are part of, but it's not really an act. Creation is an act. So when we say that AI generates, and we are a little bit shy of saying that it makes something, we are actually caring about this difference, about it being a process and not really an act. I come to the second question. There is a thread, so it will be it won't be 5 discourses. It will be 1 discourse in 5 parts. So second point, what does it mean that intelligence is artificial? Why do we call it artificial intelligence? This expression always struck me because it implies that there is something like a natural intelligence. So if there is artificial intelligence, there must be something like natural intelligence. And I assume our intelligence is natural intelligence. So human intelligence, the intelligence of living beings or animals, I don't know, is natural, whereas, I don't know, ChatGPT is artificial. Well, the point with the word artificial is that we've already been quoting this French sociologist and philosopher, Bruno Latour, but there's been a huge debate on the fact that our entire cultural tradition is at odds with the possibility to really differentiate between what is natural and what is artificial. So every time we use the word artificial, we're actually doing something quite sketchy from a theoretical point of view. So from our perspective, from a philosophical perspective, every time we use the word artificial, there are some problems that will appear. And I would like to show you what these problems can be. Let's go back to Aristotle, for instance. What is artificial? We had generation, so I already told you what generation is about. Production, so the production of what is artificial is basically the opposite of generation. We had said that what generates has the same matter of what is generated. When we produce something, we do not use our own matter. We use some matter outside of ourselves. So we use wood, stone, et cetera, et cetera. We say that generation is about conformity. So when I generate something, it has the same form than myself. If I generate a child, it will be a human, just more or less, like me. If I produce something, there will be a deformity. So there will be a difference of form. I will apply from the external form to something that has not that form and that is not my form. And then there is a third element, which is the most important one, which is autonomy. With generation, I don't really have to choose something. With generation, I'm, so to say, part of a process. I'm part of something that is not entirely in my control. With production, on the contrary, we have a specific form of deformity, of heteronomy, which means I always have a difference between my idea of what the product must look like and the result. That's the basic idea of production from Aristotle. When I produce something, it will never be perfect, precisely because the idea of a product is related with the idea that there is a starting idea and an end result, and they are not the same. So there are 2 problems with this framework. The first one is that if we take artificial in this meaning, and if we think of artificial just as what has been made by us, so to say, I have some problems in defining our own intelligence as artificial. Our intelligence is not, our intelligence is natural. Our intelligence is not natural. We are not only generated as living beings, we are produced. If you leave a child in a forest, it doesn't start speaking or writing. It doesn't start, so to say, creating a culture. There are many elements from the point of view of human evolution that require not only generation, but production. For instance, there is this German philosopher, Peter Sloterdijk, who's just part of this huge debate on this subject, but I use this as an example. who has created this word, anthropotechnics, in order to address this problem. So as humans, we are not only natural beings, we are artificial beings. We are made into what we are, and we are artificial products. So first of all, it is a little bit odd to call our intelligence and what we are natural in contrast to what artificial intelligence is supposed to be. And there is a second problem. The second problem has to do with the idea of our intelligence. So how does our intelligence work? Our intelligence always works like in the, according to the principle of heteronomy. So when we do something, we always have to think about what we want to do, and we can compare, so to say, what we want to do with the result. So we almost never generate. The metaphor of generation is actually a metaphor we use for some artists, like Jackson Pollock, when he generates something because he doesn't really think about what he's doing, because he's not choosing to do what he's doing, because he's inspired, for instance. But we usually we usually think about what we have to do, which is that the 0 degree of our humanity is precisely this idea of artificiality. We are humans because we are able to recognize the difference between natural things and the products of human making, which some call second nature. So the basic condition of humanity is precisely the idea of being into a forest, finding a spear, a pike, and say, yeah, someone has made this. This is not a natural object. I'm able to recognize that this is not a natural object. Which means, this is the second answer I like to say, in a way, our so-called natural intelligence is artificial, and what we call artificial intelligence is natural, because it's a mechanism. It's basically a natural process that does not require this form of distance, this form of separation from nature that we imply and that we assume and that we need every time we speak about our own intelligence. So as I told you, I come from the background of German idealism, and for Hegel or for someone who works in that tradition, it's really not problematic to say that when we speak about artificial intelligence, we are talking about natural processes. We're not talking about human processes. We're talking about nature. We're not talking about technology. If, of course, we are not simply meaning that artificial intelligence is artificial because we made it, so to say. But if we think about that, then I mean, it's not interesting any longer, because we're just thinking about it as a tool. We're just thinking about it as something we made, as a technical object. So third point, very quickly, what do we mean by intelligence? So again, big question. I'm just, so to say, proposing something for the discussion. And also, I'm trying to connect to what has already been said during this conference. So why do we think of artificial intelligence as an intelligence? And what strikes me is that we are usually, when we speak about intelligence in general, we usually put the accent on the fact of comprehension. Someone intelligent is someone who's able to understand, who's able to grasp, so to say. In the case of artificial intelligence, on the contrary, we put the accent on production. And there is a beautiful quote by Italo Calvino in a conference called Cybernetics and Ghosts from 1967. So it's a very old conference where the problem of artificial intelligence was already at the center because of some contemporary literary traditions that were trying to create automatic writing, so to say. And the question of the conference was, will machines be able to create art? So it's precisely the problem of this conference today. And Calvino's answer is, well, I don't really understand the question, because writers are machines. Writers already are machines. We can, so to say, explain how writing works just by, so to say, analyzing the empiric road the writer took in order to come from the blank page to the text. So I read it with you because I find it very beautiful. Writers, as they have always been up to now, are already writing machines, or at least they are when things are going well. What romantic terminology called genius or talent or inspiration or intuition is nothing other than finding the right road empirically, following one's nose, taking shortcuts, whereas the machine will follow a systematic and conscientious route while being extremely rapid and multiple at the same time. So the problem with Calvino is, after having said that, Calvino says, yes, but what's the difference then? Then where is art? Where is creativity? And Calvino's answer is, well, basically, we can imagine, like Jorge Luis Borges, to have the entire possible spectrum of what can be written in front of us. And what is really human, what is really creative, is not writing. What is really creative is being able to recognize, to read a text and say, yes, this is good. This is interesting. This is literature, which is, this is a very strong idea in Calvino, that intelligence is primarily about understanding, even etymologically, interleggere. So intelligence is first and foremost the process by which we are able to make sense of the world. And the strongest idea, so this is an even stronger idea if you think that this does not only have to do with reading, it has to do with writing. Because basically, Calvino's idea of writing is, I come up with possibilities. I, so to say, algorithmically proceed with all the possibilities, and then I choose the better one, what I like the most, what I find the most interesting, and that's what I will publish. That's what I will write, which is, even as a writer, the intelligence in the creative process is not about coming up with something. It is about recognizing what is best. It is about recognizing what is artistically valid. It is about recognizing what is beautiful, in a sense. So there is no aesthetics of production without aesthetics of reception. This is the technical terms we usually use, which means what we call production is already a form of reception. It's already about us having all the possibilities in front of us and being able to recognize the best one. So when we talk about intelligence, what I'd like to stress is precisely this idea that we are, even yesterday, I have the impression that we talk about artificial intelligence and we really focus on the fact that it's able to generate a lot of content, it's able to generate a lot of possibilities, but in the end, it's us who decide. It's us who decide, so to say, what's beautiful, what's the best option, what's to keep and what's not to keep. Fourth question, I'm almost done. So what is creative? What does it mean? What do we mean when we say that something is creative? And here, I mean, we have already mentioned Margaret Boden, the idea that something is creative when it's new, surprising, and valuable. And I think the problem with that sort of model is that it's very much focused on objects. So the basic question is, when is a product creative? When is an object creative? Whereas I'd rather think of creativity as something that has to do with processes and not with objects. So the idea is, when am I behaving creatively? When am I doing something creatively? That's the way how I would frame the question. And actually, I have a very strong answer to that. Again, I keep faithful to the idea of just proposing ideas and then maybe discussing them in detail during the Q&A. But my idea is that we are used to think about creativity as breaking rules. So you cannot be creative if you follow the rules. You have to be you can only be creative when you go outside. When you think outside of the box, for instance, when you think outside of rules, et cetera, et cetera. On the contrary, there is a very beautiful literary tradition, for instance, that stems with surrealists, and Calvino was a part of it, for instance, that thinks creativity as a certain way of following rules after having created them. So what you do is you set rules, you choose rules, and then you follow them, and that allows you to be creative. So I don't know, for instance, if you know this novel by Georges Perec, la disparition. The English translation is avoid. Has anybody heard of it? Well, I mean, I won't spoil anything, but it's my favorite book, so let me have this moment. It's a book about a bunch of people feeling that something is missing, and they don't know what it is. And every time they come close to someone come close to the solution, they die in mysterious circumstances. But the reader knows what's missing, and what's missing is the letter E. So the whole novel is written without the letter E. And that's the rule. So the rule is you have to write a whole novel without the letter E. And of course, there was a lot of critiques. So this is not literature, this is wordplays, was the most interesting one. But that's precisely this idea of creativity. You are not creative by breaking rules, you're creative by creating new rules so that you know which rules you're following. So that's the basic idea. What does this mean? It means that a creative act is a meta-operational act. I use this term taken from a philosopher, an Italian philosopher, a Kant expert, Emilio Garroni, who wrote a beautiful encyclopedia voice called on creativity. And basically, the idea is precisely that. So a creative act is a meta-operational act. It's an act in which I do not only, so to say, choose what I want to do, but I also choose how I want to do it. That's basically creativity. So when are you creative? That's my very simple answer. You are creative when you are not just choosing what you want to do, but you're also choosing and, so to say, determining the way how you do it while doing it, so to say. And there is a beautiful example. Yesterday we had a beautiful talk on copyright. And I was thinking about, I worked a little bit on Swiss patent law, because Swiss patent law is, so to say, the gold standard of what it means to be creative. And they really put a lot of thought into it. And actually, they have three major criteria, which have to do with Margaret Bowden's definition. So it must be, in order to be patented, something must be new, must be valuable, which means it must be able to be sold, so to say. And it must be inventive. And inventive, which is basically another word for creative, is a beautiful expression because it means, so what does it mean that something is inventive? They created a fictional character that is the expert. So the person skilled in the art, someone who does not exist, they created this fictional character. And the idea is the invention must not be obvious to a person skilled in the art. In patent law, a person skilled in the art is a hypothetical person who knows the prior art in his specialist field, but is unimaginative. So we can imagine someone, so to say, the stereotypical engineer. So someone who is very skilled, but has no imagination whatsoever. If you show the purpose of your invention to a person skilled in the art, and he really comes up with the same solution as you, then your solution is not inventive. This is law, This is Swiss law. So this is what you have.
It's taken from the law.
This is taken from Swiss. If you go on the website of the AGE, that's how they explain to you whether your invention can be patented or not. That's very beautiful for me. So the idea is that's so to say this goes in the direction that I was suggesting. So the how cannot be separated from the what. You must, so to say, you cannot just come up with an object. You must come up with a process that is not, so to say, obvious, that is not the only possible way, or is not just one way in a predetermined set of possibilities. So yeah, this is the fourth answer. What is creativity? Creativity is choosing a rule. That's what makes us creative. The fact that we can choose not only what we want to do, but how we, there's also that, how we do it. And finally, so the question, I study Hegel, so I have to come up with a synthesis at the end. So already the 5 and not the 3 makes me nervous. So is generative AI creative? And of course, I don't want to give an answer. I just want to, so to say, tell you, I hope I already did during this presentation, why it's important to me to frame the discussion in this way. So the way how I would frame the question is AI capable of playing? Because playing is basically what I just described. So playing is following rules just for the sake of following rules. Playing has to do with this idea of making rules. So the book by Perec is a form of play, of course. It is precisely a play on literature, a play on creativity, a play on writing and imagination. And this is, for me, the most simple way of putting the question. So here I put a couple of homo ludens because I discussed it yesterday with Sebastian and it came to my mind, but it's really random. So the first element that is structural to playing is precisely this idea that rules are not set once and for all. You can choose them, you can change them, you can play with them in a way. And the second element is distance. So we can play when we are able to play when we are able to see the world as an image, which is when you are able to see the world as something possible and not something actual, something we can change, something we can, so to say, regard as something manipulable. So that is, play requires the ability to have a model gaze on reality. That is, we are able to play when we are able to see things not only as actual as what they are, but as they could be, so to say. And then we can, so to say, make up rules in order to interact with them. So the conclusion I would like to share with you is, I don't think AI can play. So I think if we phrase the question in that way, I do not think AI can be creative in this sense. There are some caveats. The first one is, I think that in the AI debate, I already said that yesterday during the debate, what is really interesting about AI is that it tells us about us. So there is this beautiful quote by Norbert Wiener, the father of cybernetics, when he says, every age has tried to create reproductions of human being, has tried to simulate the human being. And every age has done so in order to discover something about human beings. And I think the problem with AI is that generative AI shows us how many times we don't play. We are not able to be creative. We actually behave like machines. So in a way, I think that it's not only interesting to use AI as a tool or as a toy, which is something I really like doing. And so remember that, so to say, artificial intelligence becomes artificial only when it's a tool, only when you think it in the integration with human being, that is with the subject that's using it and that's interacting with it. In that moment, it becomes artificial and it becomes something that can actually play and create a distance from reality. But also, really, so to say, I was thinking about Georges Perec and Italo Calvino and my students and their papers. And basically, I was thinking how many times we actually behave in a mechanic way and how maybe AI can be interesting to show us that instead of just setting the goal of a machine that is able to create something. Maybe it's more interesting to ask ourselves why we don't and when we don't and how often we don't and why we don't. I'm done. Thank you.
Questions?
Thank you, this was beautiful. I want to get back to something you said when discussing the nature of intelligence in connection with Italo Calvino, and you mentioned that intelligence is about understanding.
Yeah.
And understanding is about making sense of the world.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a theoretical physicist,
yeah.
And one way we make sense of the world is through science.
Yeah.
And I think as scientists, we claim we have an understanding of the world when we are able to do two things: to predict something that turns out to be correct and to explain something in different ways. It can be about identifying causes, unifying things.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Now, if I look at AI, I can see that AI can make very successful prediction, but I'm not sure it can offer any form of explanation of what the world is really like. So how can you claim that artificial intelligence can lead to understanding if it is unable to provide explanations?
Sorry, the question is, how can I say that artificial intelligence is not really intelligent?
Yes, as an intelligence can provide understanding if
Yeah.
understanding is about explanation and
Yeah.
there is no explanation that AI can offer.
Yeah, thank you. Well, so your name?
Michele.
Michele. Sorry, it's, if you noticed, it's the only question without answer, because I didn't want, I mean, I'm always a little bit skeptical of the, so to say, of the claim, it's not really intelligence, it's not really sentient, it's not really conscious. I'm not really interested in saying that artificial intelligence is not really intelligent. I think it's a form of intelligence, it's a form of natural intelligence, it's a form of mechanical intelligence. Let me see if you agree with me. You said artificial intelligence is very good at predicting odds. Let me rephrase it and see if you agree. Artificial intelligence is very good as producing something that you interpret as a prediction, and that works very well as a prediction.
No, I don't think I agree.
Why?
It really depends what is the training set you're using. So if AI is able to predict the trajectory of a planet,
Yeah.
I don't think it's just me personally that prediction. I think there is a subjective fact about the world. Planet specific and that specific location.
But it's not incompatible what you're saying. I mean, the fact that, so to say, the content of the prediction is an objective fact about the world is not incompatible with the fact that that prediction is a prediction only because you interpret it as a prediction. So if I have, I mean...
I think my question is not whether AI can make predictions. I think I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
For me, the question is that if artificial intelligence is a form of intelligence,
Yeah.
and intelligence is about understanding,
Yeah.
and understanding is about explanation,
Yeah.
and if artificial intelligence cannot offer explanation, how can you claim that it's a form of intelligence?
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you. Well, then maybe one possible answer is that it's not a form of intelligence if we have, so to say, a close enough definition of what intelligence is. So my idea is that, so what we usually call intelligence is has more to do, so in hermeneutics, we have a distinction between explaining and understanding. So comprendere, spiegare, so verstehen, erklären. And it's very, very famous in the philosophical debate. But it's only one way of going about it. What I wanted to tell is, in order to, so when we speak about intelligence, what we are usually implying is that there is a distance, so to say, is that I'm understanding that there is something, that something can be, so to say, understood in different ways. I'm choosing one, and I'm connecting it with something that is not necessarily connected with it, so to say. So that's why I was focusing on the predictive element of your talk, because I mean, I think that what you're saying about the second part is already implicitly present in the first part. That is, I mean, if you don't accept, if you don't accept that artificial intelligence explains, it's sketchy to admit that it predicts. That's for me. That's how I would frame it. But so I hope I answered your question, even though in a unsatisfactory way.
Yeah, so still on this topic, because I think it's interesting. So, so would you agree that understanding in the sense of comprendere, comprehend, means to map some new piece of information into an already existing scheme or representation, internal representation, which is, say, what comprehend should mean. And if so, this is a subjective thing. I mean, this is something that, well, you cannot tell whether an artificial intelligence comprehend or not. I mean, of course, then the issue of explanation is that, okay, maybe ChatGPT can explain this thing in ways which are not intelligible to us because they don't match with our representation. And so, and I have a second question, sorry, on artificial and natural intelligence. I mean, according to, I like very much this way of phrasing things of David Marr, and he has these three levels, these three hierarchies. And according to him, what I understand is essentially that you can have cognitive functions, and these as a, say, conceptual aspect, an algorithmic aspect, and then how it is implemented physically, whether it is implemented biologically or say, in a computer. And my understanding up to now of the distinction between artificial and natural was with this third level of how things are implemented, essentially. But I wanted to see how this matches with what you were talking about.
Thank you. So I don't know David Barr, so I will tell you how I frame your point. My attempt will be to show that the natural artificial distinction is not necessarily identical with the biological, I don't know, silicon-made or informatic or computer-based distinction. Because what I'd like to try and propose is that natural and cultural is just another word for artificial, is a more nuanced distinction, so to say. So you can have natural elements in what we usually call artificial objects, and you can have cultural elements in what you usually call nature. So for instance, there are some animals that have culture. So there is some degree of artificial life in animal life, and this is something ethologists are pushing towards more and more. So my problem is precisely this one. So I want to avoid, your two questions help me clarify what's behind my presentation. So what I want to avoid is, first of all, to, so to say, identify the biological, non-biological distinction with the natural artificial distinction, because then you end up saying things that are very, very debatable and counterintuitive in today's debate. So you have the extended mind, for instance. So the idea that we are all cyborgs, we are all, so to say, hybrids of biological and non-biological elements. That does not mean that we are not natural beings or that we are not cultural beings. So how I frame the distinction between nature and natural and artificial is, so to say, the idea that the artificial requires the idea of a meta level. So in order to have something artificial, you have to have a difference with the natural. If you don't have this difference, it's not artificial. It's natural. It's a mechanism. And that's my idea. So the idea is, so the question I will ask, because I think it's an open question, but the question I will ask is, do we have this distinction in the internal functioning of the AI? Does AI need to make this difference between natural and artificial? Because we do. I mean, this is what human culture is all about. We need to say, okay, this someone made, that, no, nobody made that. And that's a key element of how we make sense of nature. So that comes to the first question. It's the same thing. So I would like to try a way to define intelligence and to discuss the problem of intelligence between human intelligence and artificial intelligence in a way that does not presuppose the answer. Because I think that very often what people say is just, yeah, I mean, the sparkle of God. We are sentient, we are subjects, we are self-conscious, and then, yeah, you've already given the answer. I mean, you've already said, like there is this German philosopher, Gotthard Günther, who says that. He says a machine with self-consciousness is a contradiction. It will never exist. So it has no sense to put the question like that. And he's one of those who say that machines can have consciousness, because he's just saying, let's just see how we use this notion, so to say. So the way how I frame it, coming to the first question, is I will not just use the metabolic metaphor, so to say. So there is new information that comes in, and I'm able to use it to grow and implement myself. Because, I mean, there are many metabolic processes that we don't describe as intelligent processes that work like that. What I say is we require this meta level. We require this separation, this gap. That's what, to me, is essential. That's why I talked about second nature. So the idea that you have this asymmetry between a natural element and something that is not natural, you can call it however you want. That was my... Self-referential meaning what? Well, it's the opposite. It's the opposite because it's opened the possibility that you have, for instance, animals or other forms of intelligence that are not human. That's precisely the problem. So the problem is why, I mean, the idea is, so the question will be, I'm not excluding that AI can arrive at a point when it's able to, so to say, manage this gap. What I say is just that we must avoid the danger of just, so to say, depowering our definition of what consciousness is, or what intelligence is, or what acting is, until everything acts, which is my problem with Latour. So yes.
Okay, thank you so much. I also have two questions, but I try to be brief. So the first one is a brief follow-up on the understanding discussion, because I'm inclined to buy into what John Searle has thought about that in his Chinese room experiment. I don't know, is anyone familiar? Everybody familiar with it? Okay, cool. So, the brief idea is you get an input like a Chinese sign, and then you're in the room and you just have a sign and you have a manual, and you see which sign you have to hand out as an output. And you hand out that other sign, but you don't understand because you only have a manual and you don't know what Chinese signs mean. You don't speak Chinese. And Searle argued that computers work exactly that way, so there's no understanding. They're like the Chinese room. I was just thinking how you think about that thing. So that's the first question. And then the second one is about your definition of creativity, because to me it seemed a little bit like just pushing the question back to what does it mean then to invent a rule? And you used several terms for it, which confused me. You were talking about making a rule, inventing a rule, and choosing a rule. And everything to me is a little bit different, especially like choosing a rule and inventing a rule. So I was curious about whether you could say a little bit more about what does it mean to come up with a new rule, or inventing a rule, or choosing a rule. What exactly is that? Because it feels like maybe it's just like being creative about rules, but then it's just like pushing the question back.
Yeah, thank you. That's very useful. Very good questions. So first of all, I think John Searle's point is about intentionality. So the point is, I mean, a very easy way to say what the Chinese room experiment is about is, yeah, a machine is not intentional, has no intentionality, we have intentionality. The problem is we come back to the self-referentiality problem, which is, yeah, but this then becomes a magic property. So it becomes something we cannot really talk about. We can just say we have it and the machine doesn't have it. So I would like to come up with a way of discussing the problems that has more to do with, so to say, behavior description than with, so to say, properties of consciousness or properties of subjectivity. So that will be my stance on the Chinese room experiment. Maybe a provocative way of thinking about it is, if I were a guy and I came up with that solution to come out of Chinese bureaucracy, I mean, I'd be a genius. That's a very inventive way of trying and escape a situation like that if such a situation really existed. So that's maybe another way of putting it. As for your second question, you're right, I used many different words, and I had this problem while I was preparing the presentation. Then I thought, yeah, it doesn't really matter, because, I mean, it's important that it doesn't matter, because we have already excluded the idea that you're creating something. I mean, if you take out of the way the possibility of creatio ex nihilo, so you're not inventing in the sense that you're creating something that didn't exist before. That's the basic idea. So the basic idea of these guys, like Calvino, Queneau, Perec, is everything is combinatorial. There is nothing new. New is a lie. So if new is a lie, then you can only have this combinatorial attitude. So which means that making and inventing is always about choosing in the end. It's always about finding out. And maybe choosing is not the right word, because choosing presupposes the idea that you have all the options in front of you. There is this exploratory element. So like you're attempting. And this is something that also, I mean, in Italian aesthetics, there is this guy called Luigi Pareson who did something like that. He was very interested in how artists actually work. And he says, well, artists do not create, they try. And they try things, and if you look at people working, that's what they do. They have paths that are very random, and in this randomness, they recognize something of value, and they, so to say, make sense of their own work retrospectively as something that has, so to say, a common thread. But in the end, what you do is you attempt, and in the end, you find something. So yeah, that's why I wasn't really keen about the distinction, because it's out of the game that you can create something. So creativity is not about creation. That's basically the point.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. We can discuss later in the panel.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.